Good morning, everybody, from windy Charleston, South Carolina. It is a morning, and welcome to Thursday edition of Plugged Into History. Today is Hands-On History Thursday, and we've got Jeff and Bob back out here at the encampment site, if you remember from yesterday, soldiers cooking. And so we're going to talk a little bit about today. The musket, the weapon of the revolution. Bob's holding one here. Jeff's working on one in the back there. So Bob's going to give us a little history of the musket. I think we're going to get to see a little bit of firepower today.
Yes, we are today. Nice and exciting.
And then we're going to have a participatory event later on because this is hands-on history, right?
Where you can do a little musket drill at home. I'm sure you all have your muskets ready to go. If not, any kind of broomstick or maybe a pipe from the vacuum cleaner might work pretty good too. Just make sure you watch your ceilings. I've done this indoors, and you make little holes in your ceiling if you're not careful. This is a French flint lock musket. It's very high tech. It actually uses, and they are a muzzle loader, so they're loaded by the front. And we're going to show you some of the different equipment we use with it. We're also going to show you some of the cartridges. Now, a lot of folks, when you talk about the American Revolution, they talk about the American long run about it, but muskets were far, far more common. And as we talked about yesterday, the Continental Army, the American Army in the South, the regular army that's camped here at Middleton Place between July and December of 1782, were most probably using muskets just like these. Now, these are reproductions. That's why we fire them and use them all the time. But there are many originals still around. And this is, as I mentioned, a French musket. Why don't we come over here? I'll show you some of the different muskets we have and kind of explain some of the differences. Jeff's hard at it there, doing a little fine tuning. So as I mentioned, this is a French musket, sometimes referred to as a Charleville. It's a 1763 model. And it's just called that because on the lock it's marked with the word Charleville, the armory where it came from. There are also other armories in France that came from Saint-Étienne and other places. And also, of course, the French, by this time, by the 1780s, had become our allies, our good friends. So we were receiving thousands and thousands of these muskets from them. So later in the Revolution, this is a very, very common kind of musket. Earlier in the Revolution, you would probably have seen something like this. And this is a British, what's called a first land pattern musket, sometimes called a brown bess. That's an old soldier's term. They talk about, I think there's a satire talks about the soldier hugging old brown bess, but same idea. It is a flint lock, uses a piece of rock to make it all work. A couple small differences. The French musket has what's called the cock, where they hold the flint is a little bit different, a little stronger, I think. Also, if you notice, this barrel doesn't have those metal bands on it. So these are held in by pins, so it takes a little longer to take them apart. But really, I think a really beautiful piece of equipment in my mind. But they're loaded the same way, they're operated the same way, they have all the same problems. And they did have some problems, and we'll talk a bit about how, as we do a little drill later and some firing, why these soldiers stood so close together when they did all of this. And a lot of it had to do with the muskets, the technology.
They weren't so good at social distancing. No. They didn't have to be.
Right, no, you had to be pretty close. And we do have a few, shall we call, we used to call them dummy guns or rubber ducks. So you guys at home, get one like this, okay? You don't have to get a fancy one. But we do also have a rifle, which is a little bit different. And Jeff can tell you a bit about that one.
Okay. If you look at the rifle, especially if we compare it with the musket, well, it's pretty similar. Yeah. Okay, they got the same kind of firing mechanism. Yeah. Again, very high complex weapon, needs a rock to be able to spark this. But here's probably the major difference, and we're looking at the barrels. All right, if you look at the musket, see the smooth, and then if you look at the rifle here, there's grooves in it. If you can kind of see right in there a little bit. Also, another big major difference is this, we can be able to put a bayonet on it. Right? It's got a little hook here, and we can clip this on the top. Whereas the rifle, because if you notice my barrel is not smooth, I can't put a bayonet on this. So this one's a little different. Now the other big difference we'll say is that Bob, how accurate you are with that musket?
Well, I always tell folks that firing a musket like this, it's sort of like if you've watched track and field events, the shot put, you know, how they just take this big round ball and go with it. That's kind of how this works. 50 to most 75 to 100 yards. Really pretty close, honestly. And that's one of the reasons why these things are only effective at short distances in large groups. Whereas the rifle, of course, as I tell people, it's just like throwing a modern American football, how that grooving actually imparts a spin to the ball, and it spins and spirals and goes much farther and much faster. When you load one of these, and we'll show you some loading later on, the muskets, frankly, you're just throwing that ball down there, slamming it home. The rifle, it's a little more involved, and you've got to really get it down there nice and snug and take some more time. So much more accurate, but a lot slower to load.
This is we're probably looking somewhere between 200 to 300 yards as far as accuracy. Okay. Also, with the loading, as Bob said, a good soldier with a musket should be able to fire and reload and fire again up to 4 times a minute. All right, so about 15 seconds.
Yeah.
This, I'd say on a good day, we may be looking at 2.
Yeah, that's going pretty quick too.
About 2, and that's still pretty quick. Because again, as Bob said, because of those grooves, we have to jam this down.
Make sure it's down there nice and
also
tight.
with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they would use a greased hatch and all that. And as you're going to see in a short minute here how we load, it's really very quick, very simple. And at short distances, very effective. Why don't we show you some of the other accoutrements, as they say, that we use.
Sure. And I'll do with these.
Oh,
there you go.
Well, I mentioned before about the cartridges they would have used. And so this larger ball, and that's the other thing, these are pretty big guns, more like a 12 gauge shotgun, frankly. This is a 69 caliber ball, which is what that French musket would use. The British musket's about a 74 caliber. That means it's 0.74 inches in diameter. This is 0.69 inches in diameter. You doing homeschooling, you can do your math, you know, with that. And then the smaller ball, that's what a rifle would fire. And here, we know the Americans often would use what they called buck and ball, 2 or 3 buck shots, so a little smaller than this, with that ball. And now you've probably seen the the whole Daniel Boone thing where they have the powder horns and all kinds of things. Nice fancy stuff, but really not so useful when you're out on the field and you have to fire these things rather rapidly. So they would have a pre-made, pre-measured cartridge using some old newsprint or some old paper, and in that cartridge you have black powder, and down the bottom is where the ball is. Or as I mentioned before, 2 or 3 buck shot, buck and ball would all be at the bottom. And you'll see in a minute how when we load this, we actually pour some powder out of the top to prime our musket, and then the rest goes down the barrel and is then rammed home. And as I mentioned, very high tech. We do use flint, actual rock for this stuff. Now some of you guys, I know my son's into Minecraft, you know. They all know what a flint and steel is.
We strike it. See the sparks?
Yeah, get a spark there. That's how we would ignite this black powder to fire this all out of the musket. Now, I will be honest, today it's a little windy. You probably hear that a little bit on the audio. So these things, for instance, on a rainy day, can you be using your muskets? Probably not. On a windy day, as you can see my hat almost blew up. Yeah, it'd be a little harder. In the dark of night, it gets a little kind of difficult. So the weather plays a big part in a lot of this stuff too. But there are different musket tools. This is a British style musket tool with a couple of turn screws. They always talk about the soldiers not taking apart their muskets because, like good soldiers even today, they'd make a mess of it. They do have what they call your worm. They would be threaded. You could put it on the end of your ramrod and clean the musket barrel. Also, if you had to sort of run a rag down there or clear a fouling. Things like tow, which is a byproduct of making linen cloth, could be used to wad and clean, and even good for fire starting too, so good for a little bit of everything. And a lot of times on these cartridge boxes, and I'm wearing my cartridge box here, I have a pick and a whisk. And pretty much what it sounds like. You have this whisk to clean out the pan, and the pick, well, that's pretty important too. If you take a look here, this is another one of our French muskets. There's our flint, there's our battery or a steel, and you can see what's called the pan there. It's kind of a bowl-like aperture. And so they would put a little bit of black powder there, but you have to make sure that when it fires, when it flashes, it goes through that touch hole and flashes through, and so you gotta make sure that hole is clear, and that's what your pick is for. And every now and then this black powder, and we know, I have seen some cartridges that were made in the 18th century, and it is the military, so it's lowest bid kind of stuff. Today black powder burns pretty well. There's probably a little dirt and charcoal and other things mixed in. So even with the modern black powder, it's pretty messy stuff. After 5 or 6 shots, there's a lot of junk kind of built up in there. So the whisk is to keep things cleaned out of the pan. So we've also got a few other items out here I might as well show you. This is kind of fancy stuff. Brick dust. And it sounds just, well, it is just what it sounds like. It's actually a pulverized brick in a bit of a suspension, this being very fancy stuff, beef tallow. And they say, wait a minute now, these guys, they were living out in the woods, and everybody talks about how, you know, the American Army was ragtag and bobtail. And that's one of the things that you could tell about these soldiers, though, that they kept their arms quite well kept and oiled and shining. They talk about in the Battle of Guilford Courthouse in March of 1781, the British Army out there in the Carolina backcountry, as they marched on to the field, the American troops mentioned how their arms were refulgent. There's your word for the day. Meaning very, very shiny, very bright. They could see them coming. And so the American troops here, it's remarked on as well how poorly fed and equipped they are, but they would keep these arms in good repair.
A dirty weapon does not work.
Nope. Nope.
That's the important thing.
And I mentioned my cartridge box. It's made of leather, of cowhide, and you have these pre-made, pre-measured cartridges already in there. Now the American Army, frankly, always short of supply, so they did use some other things, other cartridge boxes. This is one of my favorites, the tin canister, or cartridge canister. Pretty easily made, and they could simply pile up cartridges inside. I've got my old neck cloth in there just in case. Now I will say, just like good soldiers, you hear all the time where their officers were complaining about how the men were using these for things like cooking and drinking water and digging with, so always a problem. Same things. And I do have a powder horn here, and it's a pretty simple horn. Honestly, again, not used very much. I don't know of any examples here in the South. With the regular Continental Army, it's used. It can be useful if you have what's called a flash in the pan. Now a musket. Let's see, mine's over here somewhere. On a musket, of course, you have your lock, you have your stock, and your barrel. Lock, stock, and barrel. You have it all. Of course, the other thing with a musket, here we're learning some etymology today. It is on half cock right now. That's the safety. So it won't go off. Don't want to go off half cocked. That's where it comes from. And as I was saying before, you get this what's called a flash in the pan. So you put your powder here, it flashes, and hopefully it flashes through to the main charge and it all goes out the barrel. Sometimes it doesn't. You get that flash in the pan. It's a quick, short little blast. So when you get that, of course, you can re-prime. Use your pick, clear your touch hole, re-prime from a horn. So maybe an NCO, a sergeant, or maybe even an officer might have one. Just to prime a little bit and then fire again. And away it all goes. Well, we've been talking quite a bit. Do you want to
You want to fire?
throw one of these things around a little bit?
Let's fire.
All right.
All right.
I'm going to point this in a safe direction, even though we're not firing a ball, of course.
Can we be super clear about that? The charge that you are using today, Bob?
Yes. Yeah, it's just black powder. Now, a lot of folks who have seen these reenactments and living history events, you will see them fire these things, and they make a lot of noise and a lot of smoke. And there is no ball. I remember that cartridge I showed you earlier with that ball down the bottom. None of that. So it is a little quicker and easier to load this way. And I'll be honest, there's less kickback. But yeah, definitely we don't only fire those on a safe range in a safe area. You kids at home, don't try this, you know. So I'm going to start off at the position of shoulder. And tell you what, do you want to swing around, because I'm going to fire in that direction. I figure we'll stay nice and safe. Okay, this is good.
You want the priming ready?
Position, I'll go to the position of attention. Jeff's going to throw some orders out there. He's got his NCO's sidearm on there, and so he'll be giving the command here. But I'm at the position of attention. My heel's a little bit apart. My left eye over my waistcoat button, if I can keep my hat on. Bit of breeze here today. And they would get the order to.
Okay. So first one, we'll give him the order to prime and ready. All right, so he'll bring it in the front. He's going to open up the pan, as you see. He's going to reach into his cartridge box, pull out that cartridge, okay? Open it up, and now he's going to bite off the top, right? And now he's going to prime the weapon. So in that little pan we showed you earlier with that little touch hole, he's just going to put a little bit of powder in there, all right? That's going to be our initial spark. All right, once he got that in, he's going to shut the pan. Now, he's going to charge the weapon. So he's going to pour the rest of the powder down. And he's not only going to pour the powder down, we're going to take the whole cartridge.
Yeah.
And put it down.
A little wadding.
All right, just a little bit of wadding here. Not going to use it all. Now, next, what he'll do next, he's going to pull out the ramrod. All right. Jam it down. Make sure it's all the way down. Bring it back out. Pull it back. He's got that. All right, and then he's going to go to the shoulder. All right, going to the shoulder gives me, the commander here, or the NCO, I know he's ready right now. So next command would be make ready. All right, he's going to fully cock the weapon. Take aim. Fire. And then if we were on the line during a battle, we repeat the whole process. Just keep going from there.
Back, forth, and away we go.
All right. Now, if you can imagine this in a line of, let's say, 15, 20 gentlemen, all right? Not only the noise it's making, all right? Also think of all the smoke that this is pouring on as well. So this gets a little, shall we say, confusion, a little chaos is going, a little ordered chaos, the best we can, all right? So, excellent. Bob, what kind of kick? I know that's a question I get all the time.
Just a touch. I will say, firing these things live, it's like firing a shotgun. Very much like that. Modern weapons today, of course, they have all kinds of springs and cushions and different things. This has none of that. This is truly oldie timey. So it does give you a good kick. They do talk about sort of leaning into it and taking that in the shoulder. It's, it's nothing they didn't all know about back in the day. Now, one thing I will mention, rifles, good strong kick as well, but not as common because they were a lot harder to make. A lot of these soldiers, when they turn up for what they call militia duty, they turn up to assist the army very often instead of bringing their own. And think about it from their point of view. Here you have this rifle with this really, I'd say maybe not the price of a new car, but maybe like the valuable, like a used car kind of price you're talking about. Am I going to bring that when I turn up for duty, or will I go and get one of the muskets they'll just give me? And so, of course, I'm going to leave my rifle at home. So a lot of these militia troops that turn up for 30, 60, 90 days, they'd be issued these muskets. Although General Green always complains about how they're ill-kept. And you can see already how all that's the one shot I fired, and all that junk from that one cartridge of black powder.
How often do you think you need to change the flint?
Well, this is a good flint. I've had flint shatter on me. You fire and this go. They dull a bit. You can turn it and turn it around. I'd say firing these things, it's much more an art than a science. But I'd say you make it 8 to 10, maybe a dozen or so. Again, depending on the flints too. One of the things, of course, during the American Revolution, some of the best flints came from England. Now they did have French flints as well, what they call a blonde flint. Now we did a lot of those, but I'll be honest, the English flint's pretty good. And of course we didn't produce much here domestically until after the American Revolution. But yeah, flint, very important to it, even though, like I say, it's just a rock, but it makes it all work. And of course, once we've fired a few times, and you can see across our greensward, that's about where I'd be firing at someone, about as far away as that is. And again, these battles very close in a lot of ways. One of the ones I like to talk about is cow pens up in the upstate. When you get the chance and these national parks are open again, go stop by. It's up near Chesney. And it'll give you a great idea because that battle takes place in about, maybe 20 minutes or so, in a space about as long as our greensward. There are a few volleys fired. The British come charging at the end towards the American Continental Army that was there, and they were stopped and defeated. But can you imagine, a couple hundred of these things going off right in your face, followed up by, of course, a bayonet charge. And let's talk a little bit about the bayonet.
Yeah.
Now, this is my bayonet, developed in Bayonne, France, hence the name. bayonet, and it locks on a little bit.
While you're fixing that up there, Kathleen, these are reproduction arms. These are not originals that we are firing out here.
Correct. Now, I'll be honest, this one I've had for 30 years or more, and it's about as close to the weight of an original. Jeff has one. This is the same model, French Charleville, if you will, and it's a bit heavier. A lot of these newer reproductions are a bit heavier. This one's, you can still purchase them. They're made by an Italian company. And they're great for our museum settings. They're great for folks doing living history and interpretation, letting people actually handle these kinds of things and get the feel of the weight and what have you and the technology. But no, you can get originals, but keep them in the museums, folks. Much more.
And by the way, just for those who might be wondering, I know you can see the sheep behind us. When we did the firing, the sheep were right beside us. Bob fired the weapon. They lifted their head, they looked at us, and then they went right back down and started eating again. So everyone's fine out here.
Oh yeah, no casualties. But yeah, the bayonet, of course, as I mentioned before, they're working in very close distances. After they were firing, these soldiers would get the order to charge, bayonet. And I'll be honest, if I see a few hundred soldiers coming at me in a nice close line all together, what would you do? I know I would run away.
I would not stick around.
Run away!
And that was the whole idea. We talk about, these, we're firing muskets and talking about bayonets. By far, more of these soldiers either ran away or die from things like disease, malnutrition, exposure, those kinds of things. And honestly, I hate to tell you folks, but for much of the American Revolution, the American Army was the one that ran away. The British were quite skilled, quite disciplined, well-trained. Also the Hessian troops, German troops, Hessians and others. And it wasn't until later in the war, till the 1780s really, that the American Army develops the skill and discipline to use these. As a matter of fact, General Washington one time tells his troops, orders his troops to keep their bayonets fixed at all times. I think a part of that is to know who has a bayonet. A lot of them didn't. Also, I think it does help to keep them from being used as candle holders and chicken roasters and hole diggers and all kinds of things, as soldiers do from time to time. But it also helps the soldier to develop the skill and confidence. And you can see, now this is it would have had a sharpened edge on three sides, this does not. But to do things like priming and loading and ramming down cartridges around these things, it really takes a lot of skill, a lot of discipline to develop that. So it takes time. So by the 1780s, the American Army, while small, very well trained, very well disciplined, and very skilled in the use of the bayonet.
Can we do a little bit of
I think we've discussed enough about the weapon and shown how it works. How about we do some drill with it?
Yeah.
And you are more than welcome to join with us at home. Again, I think as Bob mentioned earlier, if you have a broomstick, you can use anything. All right. 2 words of caution. Number 1, make sure you have plenty of room above you, no ceiling fans or anything. And if you're doing this with your brother or your sister or whatever, give some room in between. Okay? What we're going to do is we're going to kind of just work these down a little bit. We'll do it real slow to kind of give you an idea, and then we'll run through it again. And I'm kind of the rookie here, shall we say. All right? So if you mess up, you don't get a thing, feel free. It's perfectly all right. You're going to see me mess up a lot. All right?
We'll just try again.
So Bob's going to give me, we'll do the commands here, and we'll kind of do them together, and then we'll take it from there. Okay?
So we start off with our heels slightly apart. The musket is actually held up nice and straight. The trigger guard should be right about under your arm there. Good and firm. So it's not one of these. It's nice and straight. And we're going to start off with a very simple one to start. This is called poise fire lock. And all we're going to do really is hold it kind of in front of us. But now there's a couple of little moves. And the other thing is all these moves are done by the drum beat, which is also the same beat they would march at. So it's not a rush or hurry. It's a simple, 1, 2, 3. So we'll go nice and easy for us. So poise, fire lock. 1, we turn and grab the small of the stock. 2, we rest our small finger on what's called the feather spring. And this is also a position that they would inspect. They would check your flint or how dirty your weapon was. Shoulder, fire lock. 1, 2. Now, this is one of my favorites because let me just show you. This is how the British Army would take their musket from their shoulder and put it down is what's called order arms. Now I'll just demonstrate, and Jeff can be amazed.
I'll let
my
you watch this. I
proficiency.
love this one.
So in the British Army, they would get the order to order arms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So quite a lot. My favorite in the American Army, and we talk about General von Steuben, who taught these soldiers this drill. He simplified it. Let's face it, these were a lot of farmers, a lot of simple folk. So the American Army, the order to order arms. 1, 2. Isn't that nice? Isn't that easy?
It's so much easier.
And that tells you a lot about the American Army. So now we're in order. We're going to go back to shoulder. So shoulder, fire line. 2, 3. And now we're going to come to present. This is the way to salute when a soldier's under arms. Also when they're playing a national anthem or what have you. Present arms. 1, 2, 3. Really not a whole lot different than the way they do it in the modern military. Shoulder, fire line. 1, 2. Now you notice that fancy foot movement there. Just like when I fire and do other things, that little step back, my left foot stays in place. A little bit different than the modern military today. Today they turn, for instance, on their toes and such. In the 18th century, it's all on your heels. So we'll do present one more time. It's kind of fancy. I like present. Present, arms. 1, 2, 3. Shoulder, fire line. 1, 2. Okay, so let's see. Oh, here's a good one. I know Jeff likes this one. Advance, arms. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nice and comfortable. There's actually no right shoulder. It's always kept on the left shoulder. But this is kind of nice too, kind of comfortable. And very often you'll see the what they call the non-commissioned officers, sergeants and corporals, down at the end of the line would often be in advance. So they can also watch their soldiers because you have to watch them all the time. Shoulder, fire line. 1, 2, 3.
So I noticed, Bob, that you always come back to shoulder fire lock. Are most commands given from here, so that even if they are, sort of at ease or down by their side, they're coming to shoulder before they go to a different command.
They do. They always sort of start off there. They have this, what they call the manual exercise, or the manual of arms. It has a set order that they do things in. Now, a lot of times, the great thing about the von Steuben manual is that this is very simplified as far as the manual of arms, but also the moving. When you think about it, again, these troops had to stand very close together, shoulder to shoulder, because these weapons were so ineffective. And so because they're so close together, for instance, here you are marching in a nice long line, and you come to a bridge. Who goes first? Who goes last? Who goes? And von Steuben's manual kind of talks about that, and it makes things very simple. For instance, he talks about soldiers at the order, arms. 1, 2. Once they're at the order, if they're told to march, they just lift up their musket and go with what's called the trail. They just march. Keep it very simple to move these troops around quickly and efficiently.
So there's a question about whether all of this drill, all of this training, loading and firing, is it the same for people who are left-handed and right-handed?
Yes, so very much so, yes. Yeah, and I'll be honest, I'm right-handed. I've never had to deal with that. I have some friends who are left-handed, and it's a bit difficult. They did not take that into account, or frankly care, which I hate to say.
Uniformity is a thing.
Yeah,
right,
well, and it's one of those things where what they had to do, they had to kind of keep it all together. Now, again, this is the American Continental Army. They'd be very well drilled by this time. I've seen where militias and things, some of them are very good. Here in Charleston, there's some of these militias, these artillery companies that go back long before the Revolution. They'd be very well armed, very well equipped, and frankly, pretty well drilled. But by late in the war, by 1782, really the best troops are these American Continental troops, and I give them a lot of credit for sticking with it too. It was a long, hard road that they'd been on. So let's do a couple more. We'll do a bayonet, fixed bayonet. Now you don't have a bayonet, so you don't have to fix one. You can go.
I'll be like you at home. We'll pretend it is.
I'm trying hard to social distance here. I'm so used to being right on somebody. So order. Belay. Shoulder. Arms. 1, 2, 3. Fix. Bayonet. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to reach my bayonet. And clickety clack. And you hold it. Now, if you can imagine 50 or 60 soldiers all in a line, kind of fussing around, Once they're all ready to go back to shoulder. Shoulder, firelock. 1, 2, 3. And of course the order to charge. Bayonet. 1, 2. Huzzah.
I was gonna say that comes with some yelling of some
That's
I was
right.
going to say you have to
intimidating things,
We'll
right?
say you either give the huzzah or the huzzay,
There's some
depending who you're
debate.
talking
There's some
to.
debate. Yeah.
And secondly, I always say war face. All right, you're supposed to look fierce as much as you can. So how about we go back to the shoulder? Let's say we've already got the that.
Shoulder.
Let's see if you can try that at home. So
Oh,
we're at
there
the
you
shoulder,
go.
and we're just going to go right to the
Give
bayonet.
us a good, fearsome huzzah.
Okay.
Charge. Bayonet. Huzzah!
Nice. Let's do that one more time.
Shoulder. Firelock.
All right, everybody, are you ready? You're gonna charge bayonets with Bob and Jeff. Here we go.
Charge. Bayonet. Huzzah!
Very nice.
Shoulder. Firelock. Order. Arms. Rest. I didn't teach you that.
Bob, can we do one other thing as well?
Sure, sure.
Before we maybe go back and run, we'll try to maybe run the drill one more time from start to finish. How about some facing movements? Because I noticed you talked earlier about everything is on your heels; it's not on your toes.
Now I have to let you know a secret. Jeff is a 20-year military man, and he's battling this one.
I'm really battling this one.
I'm going to get a nice smooth patch of earth here. So we're going to go to shoulder. Now, if you notice, heels a little bit apart, and they turn on their heels. We turn on our heels in the 18th century. And then we always keep our left foot in place. If you noticed before when I fired or charged bayonets or what have you, I'd put that right foot back. So we're going to keep our left foot in place, and we're going to start off with a left face, then a right face, then a right about face. Okay, so practice this at home. You don't even need a musket or anything. Stand right up, and you want to rock back on your heels a little bit. Rock back on your heels a little bit when you go to do this stuff, otherwise you fall over, and it's pretty funny. So, to the left, face. To the right, face. Now the right about's a little bit different. The right about, to keep everyone together and in unison, you reach back and you slap your cartridge box. You can just slap your butt cheek, it's okay. Makes the same sound. And then you, on your heels, you rock back in, turn around, and then readjust your right foot, okay? So, to the right about, face. To the right about, face. Whoop, almost lost my hat.
Nice one.
Yeah, wind's pretty good.
Good
today.
reflexes. I like that.
Yeah. Okay, so we got the facings down. And again, notice we're going to keep a little bit of distance. Keep those heels apart too when you do this sort of thing. Let's see. Let's go. Did you want to go through some of the drill?
Let's run
Go
through
over
the whole.
thing?
Let's go
Okay.
from like top to bottom, and we'll end
Okay.
with a bayonet charge.
Ooh,
How
I
about
like
that?
Okay.
All right, so
sounds good.
everybody get your rifles or broomsticks or whatever you have ready, and we'll go through with the commands and just do your best. We're just here to learn,
Yeah.
practice a little
So
bit.
let's start off. We'll start off easy, then we'll get a little quicker. So we'll start with a simple order. Arms. 1, 2. Nice and simple. Shoulder. Arms. 1, 2, 3. Poise. Firelock. 1, 2. Shoulder. Firelock. 2. Advance. Arms. 2, 3, 4. Got pretty good. Shoulder. Firelock. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fix. Bayonet. 2, 3. Might cheat a little bit.
You have a bayonet. I'm gonna do it.
Shoulder. Firelock. 1, 2, 3. Charge. Bayonet. Huzzah!
Very nicely done. Thank
Shoulder.
you.
Firelock.
Yeah.
Present. Arms. 2. Shoulder. Fire. 1, 2. Unfix. Bayonet. 2, 3. Shoulder. Fire. 2. Order. Arm. Rest.
Beautifully done. I feel like I heard everybody at home huzzah with Bob and Jeff. That was great. All right, well.
For any former military people doing this, it is so different.
Yes, it is.
Because the pace is different.
Yeah.
When we were practicing the other day, Bob mentioned to me, he says, all right, you have to get rid of the snap and pop.
Yeah.
Like the modern day.
It's a little, yeah.
And this is a little different, and it is.
But a lot of it, as we've talked about before, it's dictated really by the technology they have, by these muskets and the bayonets. And even today, they talk about modern close order drill. It does have its roots back in the 18th century, what they call this linear warfare, these lines of troops. And it's still something today. I know you can go to the Citadel and see the retreats there.
Yeah.
Obviously, living history folks, reenactments do it as well. It's something that is a long part of the military, and it's something that 200 years ago was vitally important. And today, it's a tradition they sort of carry on. And it does keep, I think, some discipline. And it is kind of exciting when you do this sort of thing. And I will admit, in my younger, thinner days, I was in the Old Guard in Washington, D.C. And it's quite exciting when you're out there in a group of soldiers doing stuff like that. It does give you a lot of pride.
Nice. Well, we do have to, we're running out of time here, guys, but we have one more question, and I think it'd be a pretty quick answer for you. Folks want to know how heavy these weapons are, the musket and the rifle.
Okay.
Not terrible.
No.
12, 13 pounds, give or take.
Yeah, we'll just leave that. And I'd say the rifle's probably just a little bit less.
Yeah.
Not by much.
The first land pattern, the British musket, is probably a little more than 14. They are a little awkward. They do feel a little barrel heavy, I'll be honest. This one I'm very comfortable with. It's very light to me. I know the rifle is a bit barrel heavy, but that was just the way they were made and actually absorbs the other.
Yeah, I would say it's not so much the weight. It's not very proportionate to the weapon. That's really the awkward thing, because as Bob mentioned, it's mostly in the barrel is where it's coming from.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. We really appreciate it. Hope everybody had fun with Hands-On History today. We hope you got a little bit of musket drill in, a little bit of 18th century exercise.
Now,
and
we do this also on the 4th of July. If you want to come out, hopefully we'll be having all kinds of folks come out and visit us. We'll do musket firings and all kinds of things as well. So
great.
Keep in mind.
Thanks everybody for participating. We really appreciate it. As you know, our mission here is to connect people with the past and through that connection better understand ourselves and each other. So we're really grateful that you could come and participate with us today and hopefully march around a little bit with your favorite broomstick or practice rifle and practice musket. And we just hope that you're all staying safe and well, and that you are staying healthy and not going too stir crazy there at home. So if you have an opportunity to support these programs and the mission of Middleton Place, you can go to middletonplace.org/donate. We actually have a matching grant happening right now. So if you're able to give a little bit financially as well as your participation here, watching and sharing, which are so important for us, we really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow afternoon for a conversation about coffee, tea, and chocolate. Friday, 5 p.m. And don't forget, every day, lamb cam at 4. So thank you so much. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Jeff, for your wonderful knowledge. We appreciate it. And we'll see you all again soon. Thanks for being here.
Stay healthy.
Bye.